Hello, everybody. Welcome to this live stream by the Geo Scholar. Sorry I'm late. It was supposed to start at 3. We had some technical difficulties, but here we are, ready to go. This live stream is going to be about the accents that you would find in Louisiana. And one thing that got me interested, believe it or not, was a video that I saw. There's actually a YouTuber by the name of Caitlin Sunshine that I saw a video about Cajun accents, and believe it or not, there's actually more than one accent in the state of Louisiana, and there's actually more than one accent that you would find in the city of New Orleans. And to start, let's start with some geography here. I'm gonna bring up Google Earth as usual. We can get it to load properly. And there's Louisiana right there. There's its location. Nearby, you have Texas, you have Arkansas, you have Mississippi, and then you have the Gulf of Mexico right here. You've got Baton Rouge, its capital, and then you've got New Orleans, sort of the largest metropolitan area. I will go back to that map in a moment, but you have a region of just unique accents, and everywhere you go, accents, it's part of language, it's part of cultural geography, and you think about how people speak. You go to every different region and how accents are actually formed, how people talk, because nothing happens out of the blue. Nothing happens for things do not take place for nothing. You know, you go to one region, you notice how people talk, and then you go to another region and you notice how people talk, and you have to think about the certain influences that take place in that area. You have to think about what cultural influences are taking place there, like why do people talk the way that they talk, and then why do some people speak differently, and when you know how much coverage do you find within that part in terms of how people talk. For instance, you go to one place and, give you an example. Think about the think about the so many different accents to think of in the United States. Think about the Baltimore accent. You know, one of the one of the main hallmarks of the accent, you tend to hear the term "hun" a lot. And then another And then you also have to think about sort of, being an East Coast city. A lot of East Coast cities have a very non-rhotic accent. You tend to drop the R in a lot of your words. But then you look at Baltimore, you know, you look at that particular East Coast accent is distinct. You find it just in Baltimore, around the Baltimore area. And you have to wonder, what are the influences there? How much do you find that accent? And then you also have to think about other accents, like when I mean coverage, like how much spatial distribution of that accent, other accents like your Midlands accent, your Upper Midwest accent, your Cajun accent, your certain Southern dialects, like how, like, where is it spoken, what geographic coverage is there. Now, for the purpose of this, I'm going to focus on the state of Louisiana. You know, with the state of Louisiana, you tend to have three dialects. You have the Cajun accent. You have the typical Southern dialect, because Louisiana is located in the southern United States of America, and then you have the New Orleans accent. And I'm going to hit the New Orleans accent last. But you look at the Cajun accent and you look at where it's distributed. It's distributed in a region in Louisiana known as Acadiana, or Cajun country. In fact, I'm gonna bring up another map and I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show you what that looks like. I will show you. There it is. You've got the you got the 13 map. You got this. You got the counties here. Basically, Cajun country is sort of the region, right around here. Right around here, this little area of southern Louisiana. And what you have here, this is Cajun country, and this is the distribution of the Cajun accent. And with the Cajun accent, you have a lot of sayings, that incorporate a lot of Cajun French. You have a lot of that French influence because of the settlement of the, French-speaking people that came there from Canada during what was known as La Grande Arrangement, where you had a lot of, you had the expulsion of French-speaking peoples in places like, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, because there was a lot of people wondering, would they be loyal to the British Crown or would they be loyal to France? And what ended up happening was a lot of people from that area settled in, the areas. Some went to New Orleans and then left New Orleans, settled outside of New Orleans, went into the swampy areas of southern Louisiana, places today like Lafayette, Lake Charles, those areas, places like Erath, Eunice. You had a lot of people settling in those areas, and they took their French Catholic culture with them. This is why, if you go to that area, this is why Louisiana sticks out so much from so much of the South. You go to the rest of you go to most parts of the South, you have mostly a Protestant base, but if you go to Louisiana, you have a large Catholic base. Louisiana it always had French speaking influences. It always had French influence, but with the Cajun influence, you had a very different kind because you had people coming from French speaking people coming from Canada, and then many of them moved into the swamp regions, and you had sort of different influences there, and the food developed differently because you had a lot of the different influence. You have to understand Louisiana is one of the few places where rice can be grown. You have many people took on influences of food that not only brought in sort of French way of cooking, a French way of doing, but they also took in certain influences of Native American and African influences, and Spanish and Italian, and some of that can be found in the speech patterns as well. Take for instance the word, you know, the Cajun word for persimmon, plaquemine. Now, persimmon is like a little small fruit that you find on a lot of trees. Plaquemine is the Louisiana Cajun word for persimmon. Now, persimmon. Now, the Cajun word for that plaquemine, it comes from a Native American word. I think it's Choctaw, but the Choctaw word for persimmon, plaquemine, and then so that's where you sort of got that French word for it. But you have a lot, you have sort of like that Acadian influence because a lot of them came from the region of Acadia in Canada, where it's modern day New Brunswick, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, that area of eastern Canada known as the Maritime Provinces. Sort of that people were coming in, and that's sort of where you had that, that French influence is very strong. Denis, interesting. Thank you. We had that influence of the French. It was very strong. And you see it today. You see it in places like Lafayette. And you have that strong, that's why you have like, the Cajun French language in Louisiana. Because of that migration of people. You had that migration, you had that diffusion of the culture, the language, all of that going into Louisiana. And it has remained there. And that's one part. And then you've got another part to consider. Northern Louisiana, you go up into northern Louisiana, you go up into places like Shreveport, Alexandria, you go up to like northern Louisiana. That region is considered to be part of the typical southern Bible Belt. You have the culture there it has more in common with Arkansas and Mississippi than it does with the rest of Louisiana, because even though Louisiana as a state was very very French influenced, very Spanish influenced, because Louisiana had been ruled by the Spanish and the French. Even though you had that influence there, northern Louisiana got a lot more settlement from people from other parts of the South. And so you had that influence of you likely were going to have that influence of English and Scotch Irish Southerners moving to that area, and then bringing in that accent, bringing in that culture. And so that's where you have that, very, what people think of when they think about the South and they think of a Southern accent. That's what many people think about. And you have to, you find that in northern Louisiana because of the influences and the migration of people there who had, you listen to people from Mississippi speak, or you listen to people from Arkansas speak, or you listen from, to people from other parts of the South, you notice that that accent is a little more prevalent in northern Louisiana, and it's a much more Protestant region within Louisiana compared to, say, the Acadiana parishes of Louisiana. Oh, by the way, in Louisiana, they don't have counties there, they have parishes there. It's sort of, holdover from the French Empire days. And, that's an influence from the French there. But you have that. And then you have the third accent, the New Orleans accent. And I save this one for last because even here in the New Orleans area, you have different accents. The New Orleans accent, if you listen to it close, you got three variants of the New Orleans accent. You've got the Yat dialect, you've got the Uptown dialect, and you have what's known as the African American English vernacular dialect, also known as Ebonics. But I will mention that. I will mention all three right here. You've got the Yat dialect. There is a famous writer once, I think, John Kennedy Toole, who referred to New Orleans as that Hoboken on the Gulf. Hoboken is in Hoboken, New Jersey. You listen to the Yat dialect, it sounds very, very similar to the New Jersey dialect. It sounds very much like the Brooklyn dialect that you find in New York. And that actually has a lot to do with the migration patterns that have been found in New Orleans. Because you had a lot of people who immigrated from places like Italy, Germany, Ireland, Croatia. You had a lot of people immigrating from different parts of Southern Europe, and many people, you had similar migration patterns to places like New York and New Jersey, and so you had that accent sort of develop in a similar way. And you can still find that accent in the greater New Orleans area today. Very accent, very well associated with the working class white population around greater New Orleans area. And then you have the uptown dialect, which is heavily associated with middle upper class white New Orleans population. And you have that dialect, you think of your upper class southern accent, you've got that. You've got that upper class influence there. And, that's your second. And then you have your African American English vernacular dialect. You find that in the greater New Orleans area. African Americans being a very large part of Louisiana's population at large, and a very large part of the New Orleans population. And so you have that influence there as well. You had a lot of different influences in the state of Louisiana in general. A lot of migration, a lot of historical geography to look at, because you had a state that was ruled by the French, the Spanish, and then became part of the United States of America. And then you had a lot of immigration from places like Italy, Germany, Ireland, Croatia. There's so many different places coming, and nowadays you've got immigration coming in from Vietnam, Honduras, other different places. And you got so many different cultural influences that have become part of the state's, social fabric. You have the slave trade and a lot of people coming in from Africa that are now currently part of Louisiana's population as Americans. Actually, well, we're all, Louisiana, obviously being part of America, the people in Louisiana are Americans. You know, an American state with so many different influences. You know, you had the influence of, you know, different French influences. You had the, obviously, it was founded by, you know, Louisiana was colonized by the French. And then you also had French settlers coming in from Canada, many, and then you had that sort of different influence, and then you had the influence of the African, the Native American, the Spanish, Italian, all these different influences coming together. You know, sort of, you know, you got little different dialects, little accents, you know, the migration patterns, everything just coming together and just forming a different, you know, what you would call a gumbo of sorts, or a jambalaya of sorts. You have sort of the different accents throughout the state, and just the different influences. You know, you also have the, what many people would think about as your average Southern influence in Louisiana as well. You know, and so you've got just different everything in Louisiana, and it's all in the details. You have to really look at it. You have to look closely at it. You have to look at the migration patterns. You have to look at just how everything just formed together. You have to think about, why do people in this region speak differently from this region and from this region? And in the state of Louisiana, it's really interesting because you go to New Orleans, you got three different accents. You can go from one part of the city to the other part of the city and find people talk totally different between different parts of the city, depending on who they are, where they came from, you know, what cultural influences are there. You go to one part of the city, you have an accent totally different from another part of the city, and then you go to another part of the city, totally different. And then you look at the rest of the state. You go to a place like Acadiana, which, you know, you got the large French Cajun influence there, and then you go to northern Louisiana, you got that southern influence, and then you go to greater New Orleans area, you got that influence there. You got that New Orleans influence. And then you go to the Florida parishes, you got some influences from Mississippi there. And you got some influences from New Orleans. You got so many different influences, you know, so many, influenced by certain migration patterns, certain cultural aspects of that area. And, you know, it's something to really look at very closely. And this is the end of my live stream. Hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, be sure to leave a comment, like, and subscribe. And until next time, this is the Geo Scholar.